We'll join in singing the alma mater. You may be seated. Good morning. It is my honor to welcome students, faculty, trustees, and our speaker, Elizabeth Montesano Roach, to our convocation for this year. What is a convocation? A convocation is an official welcome to an academic institution. For me, it is the morning that we get to set the tone for the year at SEM. Our class trips are behind us, our first matches and games are under our belt, and the first few nervous days of school are over. On our opening day, I mentioned our new strategic plan, and at our picnic on Friday night, Board Chair Kate Bowen-Smith, class of '92, referenced one of the 5 values from the plan, a community of belonging. Today, I will mention another of those 5 values in our strategic plan, women as scholars and leaders, because our speaker epitomizes scholarship and leadership. Elizabeth Montesano Roach, Vice Chair of the SEM Board, is a graduate of Mount Holyoke College. She received her master's degree from Breadloaf at Middlebury College in English Literature. And she has just recently retired after 40 years of teaching and coaching both students and faculty at St. Andrew's School in Delaware. To me, she is simply a friend, and as we were just figuring out, we've been friends for 50 years. We met in 7th grade. We went to high school together, played on teams together, were in performances together, had classes together, spent lots of time together. After high school, we went our separate ways, both of us following our lifelong passion in education. It was SEM that brought us back together. Elizabeth's mom and 2 sisters are SEM graduates, and that's just a sliver of the family ties and connection at SEM. And she, you may recognize, returns each year to present the award in memory of her sister, Callie Montesano, on class day. When I think of women of impeccable scholarship and quiet but strong leadership, Elizabeth rises to the top. It is my pleasure to welcome my friend, a scholar and a leader, Elizabeth Roach, as our convocation speaker this year.
Thank you so much, Helen, for that nice introduction. Good morning, SEM community. I wish that I could be there with you in person, but it's such a privilege to talk to all of you today as you celebrate one of my favorite academic rituals, convocation. I love convocations because they honor the intellectual vibrancy and energy and spirit of a school and mark the beginning of the exciting year of teaching and learning ahead for students and teachers. Mrs. Marlette invited me here today to share a bit of my story as an English teacher for 40 years at a boarding school in Delaware. When I started teaching at St. Andrews in 1981, I was 22 years old, a recent college graduate, just married, and completely new to a boarding school and teaching. I really had no idea what I was doing, and I had no idea why I was doing it. I remember moving through those early, blurry days of teaching and coaching, just trying to survive, trying to find a bit of light to make sense of this new job and new life of mine. I loved literature. I loved sports. I loved the beauty of the campus. And I loved being married, but it was also all confusing, exhausting, and overwhelming. In literature, there is often a moment near the beginning of the novel that captures the essential elements of the story as a whole. As readers, we can usually identify this moment because of the way the author signals to its significance, but we can't fully appreciate its meaning until we finish the novel and see how the moment gives clarity and when Stacy Williams, a ninth grader I had not yet spoken to, approached me one day and told me that she was my daughter, that I was her mother, that we were family. You perhaps can imagine my surprise in that moment. After all, I was 22 years old and not really ready to become a mother to a 14-year-old. But I was aware enough to realize that Stacy was looking for a human connection at St. Andrews, that she was trying to find her place at this completely unfamiliar, primarily white, co-ed, yet still very male boarding school in the cornfields of Delaware, a school she had not visited, had not even seen until she arrived that September, a school far away from her home and family in New York City. In essence, Stacy asked me to see her. Actually, in true Stacy fashion, she demanded that I see her. My eyes focused on a beautiful, brazen young woman, but I also saw a vulnerable, scared young girl in a sea of white girls. She also demanded that I hear her. When I listened, I heard her strength and courage, as well as her fear and sense of powerlessness. I heard her ask for family, for safety, for protection, for visibility. In short, she wanted me to bear witness to her existence at St. Andrews. In doing so, she prompted me to both awareness and action. I had thought in those first few months that my job was to teach writing and literary analysis and to coach field hockey. But I needed to radically change my focus and acknowledge that even in a small boarding school, there were students who felt invisible. I needed to move from the passive, more self-absorbed state that Stacy had found me in to an alert state. Part of the magic of that moment was that when Stacy asked me to see her, when she identified me as the person she chose to be her mother, she saw me. She changed my life and infused me with a sense of purpose that gave my work at St. Andrews a new direction and meaning that I had not known was there. And although I certainly did not understand to what extent that moment was going to change me and my life for the next 4 decades, I did know implicitly that my world had shifted, that the work that needed to be done at St. Andrews was far greater than just my own survival of each new bewildering day, that there was more at stake than I had ever anticipated when I arrived that sweltering day in mid-August. Stacy inspired me to shift my priorities and focus to make my primary responsibility as a teacher to see and hear every student, particularly students of color, particularly girls in a newly coeducational school, and through the years, many other students who felt invisible and vulnerable for a variety of reasons. When she sought me out, she also woke me up and gave me direction and purpose, a purpose that became my life for the next 40 years. Today, I want to talk about the importance of bearing witness as we move through life. To bear witness requires two parties, one person who sees and another person who is seen, who comes into existence and visibility because of the acknowledgement, understanding, and empathy of the other. Sometimes, as was the case with me, it works both ways. Stacy, I believe, knew or intuitively sensed that I too was lost, that she needed to bear witness to me as I tried to navigate my way through my own confusion and feelings of invisibility. Once she did, I could also see myself more clearly, and I could turn my eyes outward and see her more clearly as well. At SEM, a great deal about the importance of empathy and kindness and the role they play in living a meaningful life. Empathy, we all know, is about the ability to understand and share feelings with someone else. And kindness is about the ability to be generous to and considerate of others. I now want to add a third component to this equation of how to live a meaningful life: bearing witness. To bear witness shares some of the qualities of empathy and kindness. It necessitates us to look beyond ourselves, just like empathy and kindness, but it is also distinctive in its focus. The verb bear suggests the notion of support and carrying the weight of something or someone, while witness is about seeing. Furthermore, to bear witness is an intensely active state. It requires alertness and a willingness to share the emotional and psychological burden, to partner with someone else in their experience. Many years ago, Sister Helen Prejean visited my school to talk about bearing witness to people on death row, fighting with all her heart and soul to halt the death penalty, work she has now been doing for 30 years. In a recent interview, she describes the work of bearing witness and the need to put ego aside. There is no room for ego because bearing witness definition means you must look outside of yourself. She says, see, an ego thing would be saying all this time, look how hard I've worked. Look how much I try. And now look at all these killings. That would be ego. Oh, look what it's doing to me. Then the energy fades out of me. Oh, because of what it's doing to me. But it's got nothing to do with me, except I've been placed in this position to be a witness. And I found I can talk to people about it. That's what the fire is. See, it's just like get out there now and do what you're supposed to be doing. I'm struck by the directness and simplicity of her statement. Get out there now and do what you're supposed to be doing. Without ego blurring our vision, she argues, there is clarity and a sense of urgency. In her essay entitled Witness and Despair in Vanity Fair last fall, the great American novelist Jesmyn Ward meditates on the tragic death of her husband at 33 years old from COVID-19. Although, because it was so early in the pandemic, he was not diagnosed at the time of his death. She also meditates on the protests after George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and Ahmaud Arbery's murders. She writes, I cried in wonder each time I saw protests around the world because I recognized the people. I recognized the way they zipped their hoodies, the way they raised their fists, the way they walked, the way they shouted. I recognized their action for what it was, witness. Even now, each day, they witness. They witness injustice. This country that gaslit us for 400 effing years. Witness that my state, Mississippi, waited until 2013 to ratify the 13th Amendment. Witness that Mississippi didn't remove the Confederate battle emblem from its state flag until 2020. Witness Black people, Indigenous people, so many poor brown people lying on beds in frigid hospitals, gasping our last breaths with COVID-riddled lungs, rendered flat by undiagnosed underlying conditions, triggered by years of food deserts, stress, and poverty, lives spent snatching sweets so we could eat one delicious morsel, savor some sugar on the tongue. Oh Lord, because the flavor of our lives is so often bitter. They witness our fight too, the quick jerk of our feet, see our hearts lurch to beat again in our art and music and work and joy. How revelatory that others witness our battles and stand up. They go out in the middle of a pandemic and they march. I sob and the rivers of people run in the streets. As you can hear, Ward explicitly invokes the notion of witness as the powerful force that she needs, both personally and globally, to help her reconcile her personal loss, as well as the many tragic losses that span 400 years of American history. Witness, she argues, is necessary in the fight against injustice and entrenched racism. For witness is about actually seeing the truth, acknowledging the existence of the otherwise invisible, dispossessed, forgotten, and overlooked. By doing so, we assert others' humanity, dignity, and belonging. We see them. We see their truth. We confirm their existence. Ward asks, pleads, demands witness for herself, for others, for the world. She also celebrates the courageous acts of witness that occurred during the summer of 2020, when people made the choice to go out, to fight, and to march for Black lives. If we were really alert this past year and a half, if we were in the state of bearing witness, we were able to see and understand the lessons of the pandemic. We were able to see the tragedies and losses. We were able to put our own wants and desires, sometimes real, sometimes petty, into a larger context. We were able to see the reality of others' lives more clearly. We were perhaps able to transform in radical ways how we think about privilege, injustice, systemic oppression, and racism. The pandemic should have jolted us out of our complacency, out of our own angsty, emotional puzzles we often get trapped within, out of seeing ourselves as the center of the universe. If we bear witness, as Ward argues, we will fight for health, for safety, for visibility, for justice. We will see others instead of just ourselves. When Stacy asked me to bear witness to her that fall day, I could never have imagined the story we would write together for the next 40 years. In that moment, a moment of extraordinary courage, Stacy invited me into her life, into her story, the story that she was trying to write as a young student at St. Andrews, a place where she was seeking connection, community, a sense of identity and place and belonging. Together, we created a family that eventually included our 4 children and Stacy's 3 children, a family that needed each other more profoundly than we could have anticipated during those early years. In fact, Matthew Roach, our oldest child, and Kristen Dupre, Stacy's oldest child, were members of the class of 2004 at my school. And as family, they looked after, supported, protected, loved, and bore witness to one another throughout their 4 years there. When Kristen tragically died in an automobile accident, we needed to come together as a family in the deepest way, in the way that only a family can be to and for one another. In that darkness, seeing and feeling and sharing, bearing witness to the unfathomable pain, we grieved and still grieve the loss of Kristen, her radiant smile, her warmth, her love. As Matthew wrote about her, she was a person who lived to create joy and happiness. She was such a positive, loving, and enthusiastic presence, the person we look to as an affirmation of the human spirit and an example of how to love life. And there was even more. Stacy joined the faculty of our school in 2006 and began bearing witness to a new generation of students and families of color in her role as Dean of Residential Life and Senior Associate Director of Admissions. We had the opportunity to work together as colleagues, create together, and fight for a new era of justice, equity, and family at our school. Stacy didn't realize it that day in September of 1991, but she defined my mission as a teacher at St. Andrews, a mission of bearing witness to all our students, especially the most vulnerable students, that my husband and I dedicated our lives to and who have enriched us in profound ways. Brian Stevenson, the founder of the Equal Justice Initiative, captures an essential component of bearing witness in his book, Just Mercy, when he recognizes that he does the work he does to fight inequality, abusive power, poverty, oppression, and injustice, not just to help those who are broken, but because he himself is broken. He writes, "We are all broken by something. We have all hurt someone and have been hurt. We all share the condition of brokenness, even if our brokenness is not equivalent. Sometimes we're fractured by the choices we make. Sometimes we're shattered by things we would never have chosen. But our brokenness is also the source of our common humanity, the basis for our shared search for comfort, meaning, and healing. Our shared vulnerability and imperfection nurtures and sustains our capacity for compassion." When asked how she has been able to do her own work of being a spiritual advisor and bearing witness to people on death row for so many years, Sister Helen Prejean states, "How did I get so committed to carry on this mission for 30 years and not waver from it and not burn out? Because I got grasped by something bigger than me. I experienced myself as being a witness, being brought into these executions, and then the moral imperative was just born in me. I got to be a witness. Why didn't I waver? Why didn't I burn out? Because the energy is alive. And maybe passions in life are like that for us. They get a hold of us. It's almost like we're following them. While I would never presume to compare myself to Sister Helen Prejean, she does capture how and why the work of bearing witness can be sustained over many years. The energy is alive. Now I can see the full resonance of that moment with Stacy, how it got a hold of us and made us live with intensity and alertness, how it informed all the work and passion of our life and work, how it gave us an imperative and why we never burned out. Bearing witness to our shared humanity, Stacy and I and the rest of our newly formed family committed ourselves to each other to share in the greatest joys and the deepest sorrows of our lives. In this era, when we talk a lot about the importance of self-care, it turns out that the best self-care, the best formula for living a life of meaning, is seeing and caring for others. Most importantly, you never know exactly what is at stake in the relationships you create in the process of bearing witness. You never know what those relationships will yield, what might happen, when you will need others, and when others may need you. You, the students and faculty of SEM, represent the hope in a world reeling from this era of crisis and uncertainty. The way you live your lives at SEM will prepare you to be changed, transformed, and dedicated to healing and grace. Make others visible in acts great and small. Bear witness.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Our challenge is great, but the one thing both she and I know, because we talk often about SEM and the SEM community, is we can do this. We can see, we can listen, we can bear witness for one another, and together develop a passion that will bring hope and light to all of us. So thank you, Elizabeth. I hope you get to campus soon, and it is always a pleasure to listen and learn from you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And go Hornets.
Was that a Go Hornet? Oh, oh, and green. Bravo. Angelina, you're up. You going to stick with us for morning meeting? Great.
Good morning. Happy Convocation, everyone. I don't have anything too important today. Let me flip to the page. Today is Monday, September 13th, and it's a C day on your schedule. Today for lunch is baked potato bar, one of my favorites. I have just 2 announcements. One from Miss Mills. Today's soccer game is canceled, but there still is practice. She's currently working on a date to reschedule, but no game for today, just regular practice. And there's going to be an SGA meeting here at 12 in the chapel. It'll take no longer than 15 minutes, so please try to be here promptly. We can get through it. And there's a few exciting things I want to bring up to you guys. I think we all should fit in here, and if we don't, go outside or go up in the balcony. But I think we all should fit in here. Any other faculty announcements?
This week we'll begin meetings with Glee Club and Ensemble. So if you are a singer or you think you want to be a singer, if you love to sing, if you love to be just healthy in making all those endorphins while you're singing, please come tomorrow, beginning of lunch in the chapel, and we're not going to have a rehearsal tomorrow, but just sort of talk about what we're going to be doing, and then Ensemble also in the chapel on Wednesday, beginning of lunch. Okay, those will be not the full period, but probably 10 minutes just to kind of get things going. All right, thank you.
Any other faculty announcements? Student announcements?
Hi, I just want to say there's a community service board meeting, second lunch in the gym. So if you could be there, if you're a class representative, that would be great. Thank you.
Any other student announcements? I was going to say this tomorrow, but today works. What we did years previous is like if you had an announcement, you would sit in like the first row. Obviously, we all can't fit in the first row, but like try when you first come into the chapel in the morning, save like the first 2 rows for students who have announcements. Then if you don't like have a seat, sit there then, but try to save those just so the people don't have to walk all the way from the back. But that's all. Have a great day and get to class.